Welcome, everyone, to the Polarian series of webinars. Today's presentation, Integration, Automated GUI Testing, and Your ALM Process. Now we are pleased to have with us our guest presenter today, Amanda Burma, Technical Marketing and Sales Engineer from FrogLogic. Amanda provides technical content expertise to successfully position, promote, and implement FrogLogic as its automated GUI tester and code coverage tools. With a background in sales engineering and quality assurance and a Master's of Science in Computer Information Systems, Amanda develops and disseminates content and best practices, challenging readers to take strides to improve quality software. Amanda can be heard in webinars and seen at industry-specific events worldwide. Also joining us today is Andy Holton, Systems Engineer with Polarian Software. Andy focuses on supporting our customers implement the best solutions to their problems, leveraging Polarian's highly flexible, open architecture. Andy's expertise at quickly identifying and translating customers' requirements and their nuances has served him well in working with many enterprise organizations across a wide range of sectors, including automotive, medical, and aerospace. Andy studied material science and engineering at UCLA. Welcome to both Amanda and Andy, and I will now turn the agenda over to Andy.
All right, thank you very much, Nancy. As was mentioned, my name is Andy Holton, and with me is Amanda Burma, and our topic today is integrating automated GUI testing into your ALM process. Just a little bit about FrogLogic and their automated GUI testing solution and how that integrates with the Polarian ALM solution. Today's agenda, we'll start off just a little bit about Polarian, so sort of who Polarian is and what we do, as well as who FrogLogic is, what they do, and then we'll go a little bit more into the content. So what is automated UI testing, why automate, and why use Squish for your automated UI testing. And then we'll transition more into ALM. How do you integrate your automated testing into the ALM solution? How do you include testing as part of your development cycle, knowing what, why, when you are testing, and again, integrating all your test methods, manual or automated, into your ALM process. Near the end, we'll have a demonstration. Amanda will demonstrate her product, FrogLogic Squish, and I will be demonstrating Polarian QA. So just to start off, a little bit about Polarian. Polarian was first founded in 2004. 2005, we came out with the very first unified 100% browser-based ALM system. For 10 years, we focused really on unlocking synergies, so really bringing people together, including real-time collaboration, having intuitive UI for ease of use, and full traceability across your entire process. We have over 250 Fortune 1000 deployments, over 2.5 million users who use Polarian on a daily basis. We have 200 plus extensions, and we have 15,000 registered community members on our forums and pages. Polarian does have a global presence, and we have Polarian locations on 5 of the 7 continents, customer locations on 6 of the 7 continents, and we have a large base of reseller partners spanning the globe. In addition, we have a large number of technology partners as well, one of which is FrogLogic, which we'll be talking about today. Lastly, Polarian really strives to focus on the user. So a lot of the technology that we have in our tool really focuses around giving the user what they need and really enhancing experience for the user. So just making things easier and using the tools that you already have, you're already familiar with, as a sort of template for what we do. And so this includes things like our import wizard from importing from Microsoft Office, our live docs give you a very simple as word functionality, and round trip that allows you to collaborate with people who may not be using Polarian. At this point, I'd like to hand it over to Amanda for a bit, and she'll tell you a little bit about FrogLogic.
Hello, this is Amanda Burma, as introduced with FrogLogic. FrogLogic is headquartered in Hamburg, Germany. We've had presence in North America since 2009. FrogLogic was established in 2003 and as privately held and remains privately held. We've had steady revenue growth and been profitable since we were established as well. We have a large and growing customer base throughout the world, and you can see some of the more than 3,000 companies just displayed there as their logos that you may recognize. So at this point, we're going to go into more about integrating automated UI testing into the ALM process. Now, for some of you may be familiar with automated GUI testing, and some may not be as familiar with it. So just a basic overview of what it is. So testing at the graphical user level. So at the user interface level, and as a user would interact with the application. So you have your UI regression test. So your regression testing at the user level or the interface level. And then automated GUI testing is going to allow you to automate many of those actions beyond many times what a user can do within a feasible amount of time as well, and then run those unmanned, perhaps as part of your greater ALM process. It also complements but does not replace manual testing. Now, why would you automate? You heard me mention just maybe briefly a few things on the last slide, but just looking at the keys as to why to automate, and I won't read the whole slide to you, but if you think about how you can identify issues faster, you're including these regression tests as part of your build process. They're constantly running unmanned and can help you to identify issues before perhaps you even pass this on for further testing by manual testing or other test types. You can increase your testing coverage by being able to test more in less time, improve your testing accuracy by helping to eliminate human error and perhaps skipping functionality you would typically test due to time restrictions. And then there's the knowledge sharing. By being able to reproduce something using automated testing, you can then share that test with other members of your team and the results for them to see how to reproduce that issue as well as confirm that it has been resolved once fixed. Now, with that being said, going over what automated GUI testing is, well, Squish is our product, FrogLogic's product. It's a GUI testing product, GUI automated testing product, but it's also cross-platform and covers a multitude of technologies. Our test development environment, so our IDE, runs on Windows, Linux, and Mac. And then the technologies that we test, you can see illustrated on the left here, as well as the platforms on which those technologies are supported. If you have a technology or an application made up of multiple technologies, we can handle that as well. So you're going to be able to test your application by understanding the individual technology and across the platforms on which it's supported. Now, why choose Squish over some of the other tools? You saw how many platforms and technologies it covers. It covers those GUI toolkits by understanding the GUI, not through object character recognition or visual comparisons, but by being able to understand each of the technologies. You have record and playback functionality and scripting, and those are provided in the scripting languages listed there. So you have that flexibility, not locking you into a proprietary scripting language, as well as our ability to test hybrid or multi-technology applications. You can work with both complex and custom controls, as well as your standard control sets. If you're working with touch applications, we handle gestures as well as multi-touch gestures and have a gesture editor. With our superior distributed testing performance through the various integrations that we offer, for example, with Polarian, you're able to then include your testing into your greater ALM or build process. Another unique thing is that we provide our source code to our customers. Now, if we take a look at how tests are created, represented by the left-hand diagram, you'll have your Squish tests being recorded. Our Squish tests are recorded by working with two different Squish components, transparent to the end user as you work from the IDE, with our Squish runner creating the tests by connecting over the network and using the Squish server, which uses a Squish hook to either record tests and collect information from your application. Now, execution is very similar. You're going to have the system from which you want to execute these tests, whether that is part of your build environment, that could be from multiple different machines, and that can then connect over the network using those scripts that you created to multiple machines, so one or more machines on different remote systems, where the Squish server, simply a service, is running, listening as to what to execute, then reporting back those results to the triggering machine.
Thank you very much, Amanda. And from here on out, what we'll be talking about, besides the demonstrations, really, now that we know what UI testing is and how Squish does it and what the benefits are, what are really the challenges of taking an automated UI system like Squish and integrating it into your ALM platform? First of all, why would you want to do it? And what are the issues behind it? Now, first of all, how are we going to do it? How do we take Squish and then bring it into so it relates to our requirements management system, our test management system, even our defect tracking system as well? How are we ensuring that we're using our tools to test everything that we need to? Are we meeting all of our requirements? Why are we even running these tests? We're not doing it for fun. We're doing it because they meet a specific need. Also, what impact do the tests have? Well, are the test procedures still valid? One of the things that we see when it comes to automated testing is that while automated testing is very convenient, very easy, a lot of times people forget that you do have to have a mental aspect to it as well. You can't just run the tests over and over and over and assume that they will be valid all the time or that they won't affect anything else. So being able to take our automated testing scripts and see them in the context of the rest of our artifacts is quite important. What happens if we need to run the same test 3 times, right? What if we need to run the same automated test script on 3 different platforms or on 3 different technologies? How do we keep track of that? How do we know what we need to run on? How do we know, if the results differ from the different platforms that we're running on? And the last one, sort of the grand question is, really what's going on? What is going on in our testing environment other than the fact that we're running these tests and we're getting reports back? How does it really fit into the rest of the system? So one of the things that we really focus on here at Polarian is how do we integrate QA and requirements? And you saw in our beginning slides that we really focus on collaboration, team collaboration. And we always bring up this slide because even now, with all the communication technology, all the collaboration technology, we find that there are very much silos within a company in terms of their requirements, their development, their testing, defect tracking, things like that. And people sort of sit in their own sections of the office, they do their own thing, and they only communicate either through brief emails, memos, or just documents that are passed back and forth. They're really sort of separated apart. And this is true not just of sort of the big processes, not just requirements, development, testing, but even within testing as well. Oftentimes, manual testing and automated testing are 2 completely separate groups. They don't talk to each other, they don't deal with each other. Automated testing is more of a software development task. Manual testing is more of a manual task, of course. But that's one of the problems that, a lot of times, especially with a tool like Squish that replaces a lot of the traditional manual testing elements, how do you ensure that, one, you're either not doing double work, that you're not doing 2 things in manual testing and automated testing, and second, how do you ensure that you're running things that actually make sense together, right? And the same thing is, how do I make sure that I'm actually testing my requirements? How do I make sure that I'm actually developing requirements in the way that they're supposed to be tested? A little bit of a step back, one thing that we've seen quite a bit nowadays is really this idea of test-driven development. And you'll see this is very, very popular in software development especially, right? A lot of times you're supposed to write your requirements, write your stories in ways that are, this is what I want to do, and I know it'll be implemented because of this, because this is my test steps. Even in pure hardware development or even in non-agile software development, requirements must be testable. That's sort of one of the requirements of being a requirement. So involving QA in the development process can really help save time, produce quality systems, and really not waste everybody's time when you get to your testing and say, all right, I can't test this requirement because it's poorly written. Especially when you're using testing tools, keep it in mind what they can or cannot test is very important in your development, right? Why am I developing something, or why am I specifying something in a way that the tool set that we have cannot test, right? Let me specify in a way that they can test. It saves a lot of time during the verification and validation processes. And that is one of the things, really starting from your system requirements and breaking it down into component requirements and then going to your test specification is really how you want to do things. One of the problems is, though, that you have so many of these items, right? I have 1,000 system requirements, 500 component requirements for each one. Each one of those has a test case, right? And all my other work tasks that I have going on at the same time. So we're talking, thousands and thousands of artifacts. And that's not to, this doesn't even include yet automated test cases, things that are not necessarily written out in specification, right? How do I deal with all of this? How do I relate everything together? And that's really where creating the traceability to requirements is the most important. For those of you who work in regulated industries, you'll know this is required not just for creating quality products, but because the regulatory bodies say that you have to do it, and they require you to send in a document that says, look, here are all our requirements, here's how we tested all of them, right? But even beyond that, not thinking about regulatory, actually knowing the tests that verify your requirement is very important, because it gives you, it is a step ahead of where you will be when you actually start the testing. When I write the requirements or when I'm developing the requirements, what the tests are going to be, so I can develop with that in mind. So I know, what are we going to be testing? How does it need to be verified? And again, this becomes more and more true with automated testing. Just because traditionally automated testing has sort of been pushed sort of into its own silo, it also tends to, in our experience, be a little bit more, I would say, monolithic from the outsider's perspective in terms of what is being tested. They think, all right, run a script, get results, right? Well, each script may contain thousands of test cases within it. So being able to break that down, trace them to the individual requirements is quite important. In addition, when it comes to planning what items to test, this is sort of one direction of impact analysis. If I know what requirements have changed, I can tell my team exactly what needs to be tested, what requirements have been changed, what haven't been changed, what needs to be tested, what doesn't need to be tested. Can we reuse any test procedures from before? Again, very important in automated testing because you are writing these scripts, and ideally you'd run the same script many times. However, if your requirements change, being able to know what part of that script to be able to change is quite important. And then finally, being able to show what's currently going on. If I want to run an automated test on my UI, and we're running a user group study, down the hall that's taking a week, right? If they're not done, maybe I shouldn't run my test yet because what they do could change everything that I've done so far. So just being able to see what's going on and, again, sort of bridging that gap between what's being run in manual, what's being run in automated is pretty important. The other side of the impact analysis change is sort of going backwards, right? If I make a requirements change, how does, everything go down? If I fail a test case, how does everything go back up? And what do I need to do either in development or in my requirement specification to fix that? And so, if I create 5,000 defects down the line, this could be a 25% change request rate for my requirements, or a 25% development task rate for all my development tasks. But it's a lot of work if you're not doing this with some sort of tool. And lastly, sort of what we talked about similar to before, but providing direct feedback. Even with the best testing software, even with integrating your automated testing into your daily build process, your results are really only reliable for one day, or even less than one day sometimes. As soon as something else changes, your test results are no longer reliable. And if you're passing these results back and forth with emails, XML files, Excel files, anything like that, things get old very fast, and people may not be using the most recent information. They may be making decisions based on, invalid information. And so having a system that provides direct feedback that really shows you what exactly was the failure, what caused it, what is being worked on right now for it, is very important. So not something that we have to go out and ask someone for, but that just shows up and I can log into whenever I want to see the current status of what's going on in the project. Any gap between creating the change and reporting it, getting the results file from my automated testing tool and handing it off to our design team, any gap there is wasted time. So minimizing that as much as possible is a very good way to becoming much more efficient in your sort of development testing cycle. And lastly, sort of what this presentation is about, this is one of the key slides here, is having a tool like Polarian or an ALM tool like that really helps with integrating tests from all methods. And this, we find, for QA teams, tends to be one of the most important parts. It's very common for manual testing and automated testing to be treated completely different. The results are tracked separately. The way that they report their defects back to development is treated separately. Who runs what tests is completely separate. But there's still test results. Why is a test result that comes from Squish any more or less important than a test result that comes from one of our manual testers, right? They both report a defect, or they both report the lack of a defect, as the case may be. So it doesn't really matter where they come from. Everything needs to be tracked. Everything needs to be traced. And having a centralized tool that can bring all those results in together is very important. As part of that, being able to report across entire project is really the grand goal in the scope of things, right? Being able to see where's all my testing, what resources are being used for testing, what test scripts am I running for each one of my projects is pretty important. Not just so that you have an overview, but being able to see everything can really help accelerate accelerate the development cycle and providing the lessons learned and just helping you get better at your process, on consistently. Just being able to see all of that information in one location. And now we're going to have sort of two demonstration scenarios here. One is going to be from Amanda. She's going to demonstrate FrogLogic Swish. And then I will be demonstrating Polarian QA and sort of how we interact with FrogLogic, how we take and digest their information and provide the traceability and that comes along with the ALM solution. All right, so at this moment, I will pass the presenter ball over to Amanda, and she'll begin her demonstration.
As part of your GUI testing solution. So what we have here in front of us, we can simply come up here, create a new test, and once I create a new test, I can click record and select one of the applications that I've specified just in our general setup as an application that I'd like to test. So in this case, I'm selecting an address book application that happens to be a Java-based application. Remember, we support many different application types. Now, when I click record, it's going to launch that application that I would like to record against. And let me minimize this. And then what you're going to have is your control bar, which is indicating what you're recording, that you're recording, and also gives you the ability to add verification points, so validate information as part of your test script. So everything that I'm doing now, if I click File, New, Edit, Add, any actions I take, for example, it's recording all of these actions. So if I click OK, and let's say that's the end of the first test that I'd like to create, I'm going to go ahead and click Stop here, and then I see my test script that I just created. Now this test script, I happen to be using JavaScript. Remember, we support Python, Perl, TCL, Ruby, and JavaScript for your test suite. So you have the flexibility there. I happen to have picked JavaScript, and now we have our script that we created, which goes through and does exactly what I just performed in the application. If we click Run, we'll see that then execute. Now this is part of your test creation process, recording, playback, but many times you'll also modify a test, or what we call refactor a test. And instead of having a basic linear test, you may then restructure your test to be data-driven. With a data-driven test, you'll be able to test for various scenarios out of one test. So a test that may have started off very linear and small, you can reuse different segments or functions, break them apart into functions in your scripts so that you can do the same thing over and over, but with varying data. You have the ability to pull in external data. You can also have functions external to your script, either related to Squish, or functions that are global, which happen to be in the same scripting language. Now, how are we finding these objects? If we go back to our test script that we created, you'll see with every action, for example, activate item, I have my wait for object statements or wait for object item automatically built in. There is a default timeout, which is the maximum duration that it will wait to find this object and interact with it. And that default is 20,000 milliseconds or 20 seconds. Should it not find that object within that period of time, then your test will report the related error. You can also include exception and error handling to handle situations like that. Now, how are we finding these objects? Each of these objects, as we interact with them, are entered as an object reference in what we call our object map. And with the object map, you'll have your symbolic names of your objects as well as your real names. The symbolic names are what are most commonly used in your test script, so that if an object properties change, you only have to come to a single location, your object map, to make that change, because this is how we're finding the object, using these properties. Should your object be dynamic, instead of using an equal sign, you have the ability to have variability in how you're finding that object, using a wildcard, for example, or a regular expression to help identify that object. Objects can also be found at runtime using information that you collect during script playback. Now, let's say that you want to run these tests in an unmanned environment. You've created some tests, and now you want to be able to run these tests as part of your build process. You want to incorporate these into your greater process. Well, what you're able to do is use one of our integrations. I happen to have Jenkins here. Jenkins also integrates with Polarian. And from here, I can have, as part of my build process, I can indicate that I would like to also execute some squish tests as part of my build process. So after you build your application, perhaps the next step in that build process is to run these tests. So by simply clicking schedule a build, and I'll have that run immediately, the test will now play back, and after the test execution completes, we can see the build process still occurring. We can then take a look at this project, at that build history, and the results that we would see from within the Squish IDE are then also available throughout our different integrations. So from Polarion, or for example, from Jenkins. And from the results, I can see the number of test cases that passed, failed, and details about any of those passes or failures or verification points. For example, with this failure, it captured a screenshot, so it showed me that something failed. It captured a screenshot so that I'm able to see that failure, both visually as well as what information and why that failed. It's simply saying that two numbers are not equal, so the anticipated number was not equal to the other number. Now, there's many other features in Squish, many of which we don't have time to cover today, but if you take a look at our Squish tutorials, download an evaluation of Squish, or watch other recorded webinars or snippets online on our website, you'll be able to see some of the more in-depth features of Squish. For example, the ability to set breakpoints, the ability to record snippets, insert steps in a script that you've already recorded, test debugging, and other functionality. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my desktop and pass the ball back.
Right, thank you very much, Amanda, for the demonstration of Squish. And what I will be showing now is a little bit about Polarion. So how we will take data that comes from another tool such as FrogLogic and how to build it into the sort of the Polarion infrastructure itself. So what you see here is Polarion. As I mentioned, is a full web-based solution. And what we have here are is actually a test run with 4 test cases that were brought in from FrogLogic. These are sort of the ones that you saw over on the left there in Amanda's demonstration. But we go ahead and click on pass. Oh, sorry, let me log in here. What we see is each of the individual test cases themselves. When we open up one of these, one of the things we'll notice is that each one has its own test case, and in Polarion we can actually track the individual steps as well, whether they pass or they fail or they get an expected result or they have a screenshot or any of the information that you want to attach to it. All right, so this is just one of the test cases that we got from FrogLogic. But as you see, in Polarion, the way that we organize things is in what we call test runs. And this is important because, as you all know, a test case may be executed multiple times. It may be executed on a different build of the software, maybe executed on a different platform, or a different, have a different environment. And so what we can do in Polarion is have one set of test cases, right? Just like Amanda only has one set of test scripts, but execute them multiple times on different platforms in different environments. And so in this case, we have all 4 of those passed, and we're very happy. But what happens in Polarion if a test case fails? And then for this, I'm going to open up another test run, and we'll take a look at one that has a failed test case. And I'll take a look at this automated test that we brought as part of our build process. One thing I would like to mention is that, as Amanda mentioned, you can execute Squish from Jenkins and Maven and a large number of other build management tools. And Polarion itself actually has the Maven 2 build management tool built in. We also have integrations with Hudson and Jenkins, and we are able to execute builds directly through Polarion. So it's a very nice way of being able to integrate the execution of Squish into your ALM tool. But as you see here, we have an automated test case that we've imported. In this case, this is a JUnit test. And we have here 3 passed test cases, 1 failed, 1 blocked. But what you'll see down here is that this failed test case automatically gets a defect created for it. So no longer do I have to get the results file and manually create the defects for all my failed test cases. This allows me to go ahead and automatically create the defect. And it's intelligent enough so that if I already have an existing defect, or if I run an automated test that has 99% fail rate, it doesn't create a defect for each one. There already is a defect, it uses that defect. If I have a 99% fail rate or any configurable level of fail rate, I can have it create just one defect. So it adds that little bit of intelligence that a human would bring in terms of knowing when do I create a defect for every single one, when do I use what's already existing, when do I not flood my developers and testers with a bunch of defects that may, not all be real defects, right? Maybe someone just put in the wrong location for the file to be tested. But regardless, we do create the defects. Now, the important thing with this is, again, this is true whether I bring the test in from my automated solution. It is also true if I test my tests manually, which I can do through Polarian. But the most important part is, regardless of where the test case is from, regardless of where the defects come from, I have the ability to link all of my information together. So what I'm going to do, let's go ahead and show these test cases in our table here. And what I'm going to do now is actually take all the test cases that I've brought in from FrogLogic, and we're going to start linking them to requirements within the Polarian tool. So I have a requirements document. Let's go ahead and open the product specification document here. And let's say, again, I'm a requirements engineer. I am responsible for knowing if each of my requirements has been verified, or in this case, my use cases have been verified, but I'm not exactly, I'm not the one responsible for testing, right? What we're able to do in Polarian is link any two artifacts together, right? So if we have some test cases over here and we want to use them to verify the test cases or the requirements that we have within our system, it's as simple as going to the test case, selecting the link icon on the left, and then we get to select a specific link rule here. This just tells us how does this test case relate to the requirement or relate to the other item that we're going to be linking to it. In this case, we're saying that this test case verifies something else. So we'll come over to our use cases, we'll select the first one here, and as soon as I save this all gets saved so that within Polarian, no matter what I do to the test case, no matter what I do to the requirement, this requirement is linked to this test case here, EL251. That's the one that we brought in from FrogLogic. And now I can easily see, this use case, what are its lower level requirements, what are the defects associated with it, what are the test cases that are verified. I have full visibility into sort of the relationship and life cycle of the items there. Same thing if I wanted to, let's say, link a test case to EL147 here. Same thing, I simply click on the link icon, I choose the role that I want to use, come back to my test cases, and I link the next one here. Let's go ahead and save this. And so now I'm really getting into being able to establish the relationships between all of my items, no matter where they came from, whether they're authored in Polarian, whether they're brought in from FrogLogic, whether they were defects that were automatically created by the tool. All of that can be related together. And then, just as importantly, I have several reporting tools for those. The first one, through this view here, I have the option to look at everything in more of a hierarchical view. So right now we're looking at sort of going down the tree. And because these are sort of top-level test cases, there's no requirements, there's no defects that have been generated from them. I don't see anything here. But if I were to say create a defect, in this case, I'm going to go ahead and create it by hand, even though these ones didn't fail. If they failed, they would have created automatically. But I'll say, no, it wasn't. And then turn version 1.0. Go ahead and create a defect here, and I refresh my view up at the top. But I can now just start to see, all right, 3 of my test cases don't have any defects, 1 of them does. And I can start actually filtering these further and further down, right? So you see we already have a filter here. Let's say, I only want to see the tests that have the string adding in it. So I search for adding, and unfortunately, let's try this. I only want to see the tests that have test_adding in the thing, or maybe we can even do something like this. Put in some wildcards, search. Sorry, I guess my wildcards don't work at the beginning, but I have the ability to sort of filter and parse my results based on some query that I've written. In addition, I can simply go through and add them in a more user-friendly way through this UI, right? Say the status is set, right? In this case, I'm not getting any results, but I can filter down my results in the ways that I want. In addition to being able to view from the top down, I can also view from the bottom up within here. So instead of saying backlink, I want to see my linked item, and now I can go do my impact analysis in the other way. Show me all of the requirements or all the use cases that may be affected if this test case fails. Right now I see that EL252 has a parent requirement, and that parent requirement actually has a parent user story as well. So, I may have two things that are impacted, this one fails. 251 on the other hand only has one thing that may be impacted. So give me a good way of doing my impact analysis even with my imported test cases. Now the last thing when it comes to reporting is really how do I develop my trace matrices so that I know that all my requirements are being covered, whether they're from manual test cases or whether they're from automated test cases. And in Polarian we have a page that we call the test case traceability table. In this case, this is with the latest test records. That shows you on the left all the requirements within the system. In the middle here are all of the test cases that are linked to our requirements. And on the right are all the results of those test cases along with the test run that they passed or failed. Right? And one thing you'll notice is that we don't really care too much in here whether the test case is an automated or a manual test case. I have ones that are executed through the Polarian build system. I have items that are manual tests here, so EL2, EL3, and I have the tests that I imported through from FrogLogic. So no matter where my tests come from, I can still link them to requirements of Polarian, and I can still view them all in one space. So it really brings all of those silos of requirements management, development, manual testing, automated testing, and brings them all into one location. That's really what Polarian is about, is taking all of these disparate teams and disparate groups and bringing them into one location where they can share information, they can collaborate, and they can easily see sort of the entire project in one place. So that's sort of the conclusion of today's demonstration and close to the conclusion of today's webinar. Just a little bit of a summary of what I've sort of tried to show you. Hopefully I've come across clearly in what Polarian is, but Polarian is a full browser-based ALM solution. The goal is really to integrate all automated testing solutions and manual testing systems into a single test management system, be able to establish a traceability from your requirements to your test cases and the defects that they have created, regardless of the source of the test case. Polarian does have a fully configurable workflow and process management, very strong cross-project reporting tools, and we do have proven performance in high compliance industries. And the last thing here we haven't talked about too much, but Polarian does have a fully open API for integration development. This means that it's very easy for any tool, even ones that may not be partners with us like FrogLogic is, to create the integration with Polarian. So regardless of what tools you are using, there is almost always a way to bring that information into Polarian. And lastly, that's really what Polarian is about. Polarian software's goal is really being able to unlock synergies across all collaborators, regardless of what your goal, what your role, what your process is. And Amanda, if you would like to just share some of the summary points about FrogLogic.
Sure, and what we went over today shows how FrogLogic can fit together with what Polarian's offering, become part of that greater process, and how FrogLogic Squish is going to allow you to test across different environments. You can execute tests remotely. You're going to be able to test across your various technologies, operating systems, whether you're working with mobile, web, or desktop-based applications, even embedded applications. It's a powerful and easy-to-use IDE with both record and playback as well as scripting in a variety of scripting languages, real-world scripting languages. The way that we interact with objects and identify objects using our interactive object spy as well as our object map make it a very powerful and reliable tool for creating your tests. Now, our extensive set of integrations is going to allow you to then incorporate Squish into your greater process. And much as mentioned earlier, the source code is available to customers, allowing you to further extend the tool if you would so choose.
So just a few more slides before we finish with today's webinar. One of Polarian's goals is really to provide a flexible solution, and part of that involves bringing in our partners to connect their tools with Polarian. We really strive to continue to evolve our offering and really listen to our customers about what they want from a QA tool. Polarian does have a very broad loyal base. Several of these customers are ones that we do share with FrogLogic, but we have customers that span the entire breadth of industries, everything from pure software to pure hardware, from completely unregulated to highly regulated medical aerospace companies as well. And for the next steps, I'd very much like to invite you to visit Polarian.com and FrogLogic.com if you want to evaluate either of the solutions today. There are some other resources up here for FrogLogic, and from the Polarian side, we'd very much like it if you were to watch some of our product and tutorial videos, perhaps download either a trial or try Polarian online. And if you'd like for either of these solutions, please feel free to contact us if you want to request a proof of concept or request a personalized demo. Thank you very much for joining us today. I think at this point there are some questions that have come in. Nancy, if you would like to start with the Q&A in a session, I think Amanda and I would be very happy to answer any other questions that may come in during this time. But again, thank you very much for joining us today.
Great, thanks. Great presentations, Amanda and Andy. A few questions have come in, and for anyone that's still wanting to ask a question, just a reminder to put it into the Q&A box, and we'll certainly address it. One question that's come in, and Andy, is probably for you, is how were the squish tests imported into Polarian?
All right, so that's a great question. The squish tests that I showed today, unfortunately due to time constraint, were sort of manually brought into Polarian. However, our integration team is working on an automated solution for that. We have some scripts that are being developed so that you can simply point Polarian to a location and upload the squish test from there. Talking a little bit more generally, Polarian does have several import methods, one of which is very similar to the integration we're doing with Squish, but is specifically for XUnit tests. So if you have a test system that exports in the XUnit file format, which is just a specialized XML file, same thing, you can point it to a location and have it automatically imported as well. In addition, Polarian does have options to import via Excel, XML, and some of the other common file formats. And again, the integration for Squish is being developed, and hopefully we'll have something soon that is a one-click solution for importing the Squish test into Polarian.
Great, thanks, Andy. The next question that's come in is, does Polarian Squish support random events or data during the automated UI test?
Absolutely. It's all about how you create that in your test script. So if you wanted to randomize how data is entered, you would be able to, in your script, identify a data source and then randomize that data with the logic that you incorporate in your script to execute your script with randomized data. You would also want to then, with the randomized data, have corresponding validation or verification points to validate that each data set that you're using or entry that you're using then is providing that anticipated result.
Great. One more question here, Amanda, with regards to Squish is, how does Squish compare to a robot framework?
I'm not familiar with robot frameworks specifically, but some of the things that Squish does better than many of the other tools out there is object identification. The way that we work with and identify objects, we understand each application's toolkit. So that's giving you access to the application's API. It's giving you access to all of the application's object properties, and we're able to use those properties to correctly and accurately identify objects. It's flexible in that you can incorporate regular expressions or wildcards to help identify dynamic objects. And at runtime, for example, with a dynamic application, if you can't predict what that object is until perhaps just beforehand, you're able to look up a parent or related object and then find that object without having to rely on, let's say, XPath or a DOM path to find an object, or character or image-based recognition, which is not very good in the longevity of things as far as maintenance goes. So your script maintenance time is going to come down tremendously due to how we're able to find objects, interact with objects, and the flexibility of your test scripts.
Great, thanks, Amanda. That concludes the questions that have come in today. I'd certainly like to take this time to thank all of you for joining us. Again, thank you to Amanda and Andy for a wonderful presentation, and everyone have a great morning, afternoon, or evening. Thank you.